This tutorial series was brought to you by my company Polygon. High quality models and textures for better renders. Alright, enough faffing around, as my late grandfather would say. We have learned the basics of the interface, all the hotkeys, we've fooled around. Now we're going to start building that donut. Okay, so we are going to delete our default cube, which is just the delete key, or X, which is the older shortcut, and we're going to replace it with something new. So to add a new object in Blender, you need to go up to Add, up here, and you get this long list, or you can hit the hotkey, which is what I'm going to be using for the tutorial, Shift A. And truthfully, most of these options, wow, a lot of the options you rarely use. Like speaker, I don't think I've ever used. Most of the time what you're looking for is mesh, because to render anything, you really need to start with a mesh. Like if you followed like a character tutorial, you might be surprised when they're like, all right, start with a cube, and then, you know, we'll bip-bidi-boo, and we'll form the character eventually from that, right? But you have to start with something. So usually you pick the object which most resembles what it is you're trying to create. And in this case, there's a really easy one. It's the donut-shaped one, the torus. Torus. That is a word I never would have learned, except for Blender. I would have called that a donut, but evidently the mathematicians decided they need a special word for it. Okay, when you add an object and do certain actions actually in Blender, you get options straight after adding it, okay? But they're kind of hidden because they're trying to stay out of the way unless you need them. And it's down there in the bottom left-hand corner. There's a little box, which if you click it, it expands. And then you get options like the resolution and the size of it and everything. Now, if you don't see that box, it's probably because you accidentally clicked off it, okay? It'll only show it after you've just added it. If you click off it, it assumes you're fine with it. You're good, okay? Now, if you haven't done another action since then, if you haven't edited it and clicked on something else or whatever, you can temporarily bring it back for one last time, really, until you do something else, with F9. Okay, so F9 will bring those same options back just at your cursor, basically. But if you don't see it, then, you know, just re-add it, delete it and re-add it, and you'll get those options back again. Okay, so with this, let's make some changes to it. Okay, so for starters, this is a very thin donut. And you want to know this maybe, but this is the third time I've made this donut beginner series. Every time there's a new version of Blender, I make this series again. So this is number 3. And basically, for the last 5 years of my life, I have been seeing every day on Twitter when somebody tags me in their donut render. And I've become very good at realizing the attributes that make donuts look good. And I think the best donuts are the ones that look thick. The ones that look like, oh yeah, I want to sink my teeth into that because it's got a lot of icing, it's got a lot of dough. I don't know, just something about a fat donut, just like, yeah, that looks delicious. So I'm going thick this time, okay? And then the major segments and the minor segments, these are, as you can probably see, we'll call it the resolution of our donut, but it is it's the amount of geometry. Okay, so this, you are probably tempted to go like really high, because this is what I did when I first started using Blender in 3D. I'm like, I'm trying to make something high quality and realistic, so it's got to be smooth. Okay, so I'm going to go really high res. It's actually the opposite. You do not want that. I immediately realized when I started using this is a terrible idea. For one, you can't go back, okay? When you go high. You can, if you go low, you can add other things, which is what we're going to do, to make it smoother, but it's harder to go back. And also with this, it takes longer to render. It's harder to work with because it's a bigger file. Your viewport slows down. Your computer's whirring away harder. And also it is harder to work with, okay? When we enter edit mode, and we're going to do this later and like do some edits and stuff here, I have to work with this many vertices, these little points, and that is just too much. So you actually want the exact opposite. So we want to keep it as minimum. Okay, so the minimum amount of detail depends on what it is you're trying to create. We could go like really low, but we're actually going to use part of this donut for the icing. So I'm trying to think, okay, what am I going to do with the icing? Am I going to make some like dribbly bits going down it? I don't know. Having done this a few times, I think I'm going to go with around like somewhere around 40 to 20.
something like that. Let's go 16. 16 looks good. Okay. By the way, and you would never know this because how could you if you're a beginner? But like it's also a good idea to try to keep square faces because as a general, if you're making something organic and it's going to be smooth, if it's got rectangular faces, it can like stretch the shading and things just start to look weird. So I'm trying to keep it generally to a square face. Doesn't have to be a hard rule, but something like that. All right, then I'm going to click off it and I'm done. And I can't get those options back temporarily with F9, but you get the idea. Okay, cool. So, great. Let's talk about, first of all, the size of this donut, okay? Because although it looks like, what is the scale of our scene here, right? We're like looking into the distance there, like how big is this grid floor? We don't know. It could be microscopic. It could be, 500 meters. It could be landscape size. We don't know. We actually do, okay? So each one of these grid squares here, is it 1 meter or 2? I think it's 1 meter. Hang on. Yes, it is 1 meter. Okay, so this, actually, the size of our donut is humongous. It is 3 meters by 3 meters. Okay, so if you, sorry, I didn't tell you the hotkey. N will bring up your properties. Very handy, convenient shortcut. You just bring it up when you want to learn. Click on your object and then go to item, and then you can see, details around your object. Okay, so it's 3 meters by 3 meters, which is like roughly like 2 people laying down lengthways. By the way, speaking of that, if you are American, for my American audience, you can change your units to be Wacky Imperial, and you can get 9.9 periwinkles or whatever it is. I don't know. You can do that. I'm going to use 3 meters because the rest of the world is also watching. All right. So this obviously needs to be much smaller. So we're going to scale it. Scaling the hotkey S. Scale it right down to the size of a donut, which I've learned is around about, like, the biggest size would be around about like 10 centimeters, right? Yeah, roughly. So yeah, 10 centimeters is what we're looking for. Something like that. We could have done it when we added the torus, but that was radius. And radius is like, you got to double it to make it. And I'm like, just scale it down after we make it and it'd be much easier to figure out. Okay. Now, the other thing I want to do is apply the scale because, and this is another thing you would never know if you're a beginner, but it's sort of a running joke in the 3D world. But like anytime you run into a problem with your mesh, something's not working, apply the scale. Because if your scale is wrong, other things tend to perform wrong, like modifiers and other things like that. So this scale here should pretty much always be 1 if you can, try and make it always 1, roughly speaking. So to apply your scale, you go Control A and then hit scale. Okay, so Control A for apply and then scale. And now it is 1. Nothing has changed, but it just means things will work better in the future. And I'm just doing it because I know I'll forget it, and then they'll be like in the comments, and people go, "Why is mine messed up?" And it was because of this part I didn't say hit. Anyway, all right. Okay, so how do we get rid of these jagged lines? Because that's probably your next question. How do we get rid of those jagged lines? There are two types of shading in Blender or in 3D, flat and smooth. So by default, it is flat. To change it to smooth, we just right-click and then hit Shade Smooth, okay? And when we do that, it is basically like for these faces here, it has taken, instead of treating each face separately, if they're an adjacent face, it's going to like stretch the light across. It's going to treat it as if it is one continuous face rather than 2 faces. So for organic objects, which means length, things that are flowing essentially, or rounded things maybe, you generally want smooth things. And then for like architecture or hard surface things, you want flat things. So Shade Smooth. So we've got rid of that. That's good. Now you'll notice that it has not fixed the silhouette of our object. Okay, so Shade Smooth is a illusion. Okay, it's not actually adding any geometry, which is great because it's lightweight, it's easy to work with. It's not adding geometry, but your silhouette will still be broken or still look jagged. The only way to fix that is to add more detail. It's something that games, that's kind of the thing. If you want to look at a game and go like, I wonder how poly this thing is. Like, look at the silhouette of a character or the shape of a building or something like that. And if you see jagged lines, you can basically see the mesh, like how high poly something is by the silhouette. So we can fix that with something called a subsurf operation, okay, or subdivision. And there are a few ways to do it. But the way we do it in Blender is with adding a modifier. Okay, so we click this little wrench Or is it a spanner? Is that a spanner? It's been a while since I got my hands dirty. Anyways, it's the modifier panel over here. And then go up and underneath add modifier. If you click it, you get a whole bunch of different options here. And the one that we're looking for is, I mean, you use it so often. I wish it was at the top, but it's not. It's down here, subdivision surface. So you click that, and you might see that it has now smoothed out ever so slightly. You can see that edge there, the jagged edge is no longer there. Or it is there, but it is less. So what is Subsurf, it's called a Subsurf, even though it's called subdivision. Subsurf modifier, what it is doing is and I'm going to temporarily turn this off by that little icon there, that's viewport. So if you uncheck that, it's disabling it for your viewport. And that one is for render, if you want to disable it for your render. Okay, so what it is doing is, you can see the edge there, right? If there are 3 points that make up that edge there, Subsurf is now adding in, it's doubling the amount of detail across the entire mesh, not just the silhouette, the entire mesh. Every single point, it is now adding another one. Now, if you do 2 levels, so levels viewport and render, you can probably guess, that's just one operation, okay? If I set this to 2, which is what you would see, set it to 2, which is what you see when you would render it, it's doing it again, okay? So it's, I guess the word's exponentially. It's exponentially adding detail every time you add this. So it's going to do it again and again and again. So obviously you don't want to go too high because otherwise your render times would be crazy. And yeah, you just want to keep it as low as possible. So often I keep it 1 or 0 whilst I'm working in the viewport. And then for the render, I keep it at like 1 or 2 or something. Anyways, all right. Okay, so we're spending a little long on this, but I need to just give you some background on how to make things look smooth without really going high res. Okay. So as I teased before, this mesh is made up of little points, and we can edit those points and adjust things and whatnot by going into edit mode, which you can do by hitting tab on your keyboard. Okay. Another way is to go up to the top left-hand corner, change from object mode to edit mode. Okay. So tab is just a fast way to switch between those 2 modes. Another way, third way, because why not? Control tab will bring up the pie menu, and then you can enter into, along with just object and edit mode, but like texture paint and sculpt mode, and we'll do a bunch of stuff later on, but edit mode, okay. So in edit mode, we can see that we're now able to see the skeleton, roughly, that makes up our mesh, okay? Each of these little points here is what makes up our mesh. So these points are called vertices. Sorry, a single one is called a vertex. Multiples are called vertices. Always get them confused because it's got an S on it as well. It's like vertices, vertexes. It's not vertexes, it's vertices. Anyways, these little points make up our mesh. And on each of these points, if you've got 3 or more, usually 4 is the ideal one you're usually aiming for when you're making meshes, you can make a face. Okay, so if I just delete, I'll just hit X and I'll show you what it looks like without a face, okay? So between each of these points there, I'll add another one with F, there is a face, okay? So all the points together make up a face, and then that makes up your mesh. So what this means is that with these points, if I want to change the look of my mesh, I can take some of these points and I can move them, okay? And you use the exact same hotkeys as you did before. So to move something, it is G for grab, okay? So if I move this up and then go back out of edit mode to object mode, you can see as I move around, it's now got a little lump on it. Okay, pretty handy. So I could do that, right? I could tweak the shape of my mesh. Okay, so let's say like I wanted to, like make my donut look kind of like lopsided, or like add some detail, because this is necessary, by the way. Your brain, when it thinks about objects, because you've seen them so many times, it simplifies it in your head. You think of a donut as being round, but it's bumpy, it's lumpy. It was thrown in the fire. The guy who like made the dough, it was all lopsided. But in your head, you just think of it as a round circle. The digital world will always give you the perfect thing. So you need to go in and add those imperfections. There's an old quote, don't know who said it. Imperfection is the digital perfection. Yeah, I don't know. It's very, very true. So think of that. So anyways, we need to add some lumps to it and make our donut lopsided. So if we held down Shift, we could select multiple points, and then we could drag these out. I could do this. I could, slowly go through it. Now this is tedious, as I'm sure you can see. Clicking, lots and lots of clicking, little points. And that's really because that's not the way I would do this. What I would do is use a feature that you use all the time, and that is proportional editing. So if you click this little button at the top here, or the hotkey for that is O, turn that on and off. What this will do is that now when I rotate scale or hit G to grab and move it, now it's actually grabbing vertices around it and it is moving it together as a whole. Now, by default, your proportional size is really high, okay? So if I scroll up, I can gradually bring the fall off down to what actually makes sense for my donut, okay? Now, this was actually a point, I was reading the comments on the last video, the last version of this I made, and this was a point that a lot of people got stuck on. If you can't see this ring here, just keep scrolling up because it is there. If you see top left-hand corner, actually, it gives you the measurement. As I scroll, you can see the measurement of my fall off. What you're looking for is something like a 0.04. If you can't see 0.04 meters, just keep scrolling up until you see it. And if you're on trackpad, because those people also got stuck, because they're like, how do I scroll while I'm doing it? All you do is on trackpad, you tap G, then do a single click, and then down here in the bottom left-hand corner, you've got those options again. And then you could adjust your proportional size to like a 0.04. And then if you move, you should see the correct proportional fall off, okay? Really, guys, invest in a mouse, please. Going trackpad, look, it's fine for Facebook, but like you're doing stuff in 3D, you got to have a mouse. Come on. All right. Okay, so now that I do this with my fall off radius, and if I just scroll up and down, I can adjust and I can make my donut look however I want much more easily. Okay, make this part go out. Maybe make this part have like a little lump that's sort of skew-if like that. Maybe this middle part sort of like this. Okay, and I'll do another one here, something like that. Okay, now that's a little lopsided. It's a little bit repetitive of what's on that side. And this is maybe a little bit too far. Just sort of playing it by eye. But I have to keep this for the rest of the donut, for the rest of the tutorial. So I'm trying to do it well. Okay, and something else, by the way, another hotkey. You can see that if I want to move this up, if I was to move it like this, right? It's moved everything also left to right as well, okay? Because of my camera angle, okay? If I'm looking at something like this and I'm moving it, it is moving it across the donut. So it's scrunching everything going this way. That's not what I want. I want it to go directly up. So it means I have to get my camera angle like right down here to do that up. Alternatively, a better way, not to throw too many hotkeys at you, get my keyboard shortcuts if you haven't already, link in the description. But another hotkey is Alt-S, which instead of moving it just arbitrarily, this will now move it according to which direction those faces are pointing. And this is actually perfect for this exact case because we've got, points, rounded around it. And it's just, it's tedious to have to get my camera angle exactly right when really I just want to be able to select certain parts and then pull them in and out. So Alt-S allows me to do that. The shrink and fatten tool is what it is called. But other softwares, I think they call it move along normals or something like that. Something like that. All right. And then maybe the base as well. I think we should make it a little bit lopsided on the base. Move that down. Something like that. Now there is a sculpt tool, which we'll talk about when we get to the icing. That could also do this, but that is not the point of this tutorial. So I'm just doing proportional editing because, to be honest, like this proportional editing is perfect for this kind of thing. Yeah. Cool. So it's just entering into edit mode to do your changes, going into object mode to see how it looks, and then swapping back out with tab again. And that's really all it is. I think this is too thick on this side now. Too lopsided. I went too far with the imperfections. But that also comes into like the style of it, of what you're doing. Yeah. Something like that. Oh, by the way, another side point I just mentioned, when we're talking about object and edit mode, okay? A big problem a lot of beginners have that I find is that later on, you'll be like, I'll say, all right, so select your lamp and your camera or something like that. And they'll be like, oh, I can't click on it. What's happened? It's because you are still in edit mode, okay? Edit mode means you cannot click on anything else other than the object that you are editing. You're still in this. When you switch back to object mode, you're now able to click on any object in your scene, but in edit mode, it is locked to that view. So If you can't click on things, just remember, check what mode you're in. You're probably in edit mode. Switch to object mode and you'll be fine. Okay, just to finish on something completely random, because why not? Just throw it in there just as a little Easter egg for those of you that made it to the end of the video. Is something cool. If you go to select, there's an option there for select random, and this will just select at random vertices on your mesh, and then you've got a little ratio thing you could change down the bottom there. Then, if you used Alt-S, you would basically make a lumpy looking donut. So it's kind of like a quick way. If you wanted to make a lumpy looking donut, you could do it that way. And also if you change the falloff type, okay, so this is that ring, that little circle that goes around it, right? If you changed it from the smooth one to sharp, then you would make it something else, like a spiky warped donut. I don't know. It actually looks better without the Subsurf and like flat. It's like, no, it does not. Okay, I don't know what I was thinking with that. Anyways, all right, just something random to finish on. Okay, so play with your donut, get something that you like, and then join me in the next part as we do the icing. So click here, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.